can I batch cook a month of food in under 6 hours and for under £150? This month, I'm testing it out with a slight retro twist. Inspired by the recipes my parents enjoyed when they were younger and I also enjoyed in the 90s, I'm recreating some retro favourite family dinners. There may be some you recognise, there may be some that you don't, and I'm sure there are some that I've missed, so please let me know in the comments if there is anything missing that you remember from when you were younger. If you're new to my channel, I started doing these big all-in-one-go batch cooks and they genuinely saved me so much time, and I'm completely sold on this system for making our lives easier. I'm starting the clock and I'm getting all of the veg preparation out of the way first. I like to do this first as this is a really efficient use of my time. If you can dedicate the first hour to prepping all of the ingredients that you're going to need for the batch cook, this just helps you be way more efficient when it comes to actually assembling and cooking the meals that are going to form your freezer stash. My first task is peeling a lot of potatoes. If you watched one of my previous batch cooks, you'll remember that I peeled an ungodly amount of potatoes for mash, as my kids absolutely love it. I gave myself a month off peeling potatoes last time, but as many of the more retro dishes this month are slow cooker meals, we absolutely had to top up the stash in our freezer so that we were prepared. Now, I did actually make so much last time that I still have a few boxes of mash left. So I've done slightly less potatoes so I can completely clear the stash out this month. So next up, I'm preparing some more of the vegetables. I actually got really lucky when I went to the shops this week and spotted some great offers. So I decided to add leeks into the chicken pie that I'll be making. And it also seems that a lot of the recipes this month use mushrooms, which might be a slight gamble with my children who aren't the biggest fans of this ingredient. I'm hoping they will just melt into all of the tasty sauces and they won't notice them too much. One thing I have spotted this month is that by following the more retro recipes, I've got fewer beans, chickpeas and lentils than normal. However, this probably is a relief to our children, who always now check if my baking has some kind of hidden bean in it before they all taste it. I'm also going to add in some tins of chopped tomatoes. And while I do this, I thought I'd show you a tool that is super handy for me in the kitchen. Now, you might not know this about me, but I am left-handed. And so opening tins with normal tin openers is actually a lot harder than you might think. So I'm going to show you what this is and how I use it. You pop it onto the tin, make sure obviously it's connected, press the button, and it does all of the work for you. It's so easy, and I love that when you pop the lid off, the edge of the tin isn't super sharp. I'm also going to get my cheese grated. Now, I am actually going to use the Thermomix for this just because I am grating a lot of cheese now. Need to maximize the time that I've got. But you could do this in a food processor, or you could do it the old-fashioned way by hand. This month, I am doing some things to save me time, and you'll notice that I have bought pre-chopped frozen diced onions and a vegetable base mix for my bolognese and some of my sauces later. I've also switched to these amazing garlic cubes. They are frozen and they equate to about 4 cloves of garlic per cube. They're really good value and they just save so much time. Now all of these things are prepared, it will just mean that I am ready to lift and drop them into the recipes that I've got planned. Now this is usually the point where I realise that I have or have not remembered to get all the things that I need for the batch cook, and where sometimes I send my husband out for emergency ingredients, but this time it looks like we're good to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is get started on making my bolognese, which will slow cook as the rest of the batch cook happens. And this is such a great trick to save time and also to make something that you can use across multiple meals. Now, when we had our house renovation, I invested in a slightly larger slow cooker, and it wasn't very expensive, but it just means that when you do slow cook something like bolognese, you can double up the recipe and then you can save more for other things. So if in the week I was doing a slow cooker meal, I could just double it up, and I'm doing a little batch cook there without it feeling as overwhelming as doing a big challenge like this. So I'm saving some time this month by using a vegetable base mix that has already been frozen. And this has carrots, celery, onion. in it, which has just saved me time from chopping those things like I did in previous months. Next up, I'm going to add in my frozen garlic cubes, and these are another great time-saving hack. One of the recipes that I will be making using the beef from this slow cooker is an ultimate throwback. If you're familiar with Finder's pancakes, hold tight to see my version of them. Next up, I'm adding in some passata to help make up the sauce. I'm going to pop in 2 beef stock cubes because I'm doubling up the recipe. So recently someone commented, and I actually asked about how I produce these sort of videos, and they'd assumed that I film them over a day or 2 or even a longer time period than that. And it might surprise you to know that I challenge myself to cook the food within the time limit I've set myself, which probably is slightly crazy, and I take into account the filming and getting the right angles and shots. But this is why I started the channel. I love batch cooking, and I'm actually pretty time poor, and I massively rely on knowing that I've got a great stash of freezer meals in stock to help me juggle life around school and nursery and everything else in between. So this will now slow cook whilst I make the rest of the meals in this video. And because this is using raw mince that I haven't browned beforehand, like the last time I made bolognese, this is going to take about 6 hours to cook. So I'm going to give myself a little break in the middle of the batch cook today to sort out the chaos that is the kitchen when I do these videos, and then I will come back to this later and turn it into some delicious meals for the freezer. So next up, I'm going to be roasting a chicken, and this is another trick that I like to do when I'm batch cooking, because it just means that whilst everything else is happening, this can be roasting in the background, and you can get quite a lot of meat off a chicken. And when you shred it into things like sauces or in a pie, for example, like I'm doing today, it can go quite a long way, and it's just a little bit easier. Also, it's really handy to have the chicken bones left over, because if you've got time or a slow cooker, you can turn that into some delicious stock. And I am trying to move away from ultra processed stock cubes as best as I can. So you'll notice sometimes in my recipes, I'm using this, which is my homemade vegetable stock, but I haven't quite cracked a chicken or a beef version that tastes as nice as the ones that you can get in the shops. I'm still working on that. If anyone has any good recipes of their own, I am all ears. One of the meals I'm going to be making with the roast chicken is a real nostalgic throwback. If you've ever had a Vesta curry, I may either delight you or offend you with my attempt on it, which I'll show a little bit later on in the video. Before I move on to make the dump bags, I'm going to get my potatoes parboiling, ready to be turned into mash. So my potatoes are on to boil, and now I'm going to move on to the first preparation stage of my meals. If you're familiar with my channel, you'll know that I love dump bags. Dump bags essentially are freezer bags filled with the raw ingredients to make meals once defrosted, and they work really well for slow cooker meals or for tray bakes. When we did a renovation in our house and we were living without a kitchen, the dump bags completely saved us, as I could turn up to a family member's house with one of these and my slow cooker and we would be sorted for dinner. This time I'm going to be making quite a few dump bags, as a lot of the retro meals lend quite well to being slow cooked. I remember my mum always cooking a casserole in the oven, but I'm often out and about in the day, so I tend to lean on the slow cooker quite a lot. So this time I'm going to be making several bags. I'm doing a mushroom stroganoff, chicken casserole, beef bourguignon, coq au vin, sweet and sour chicken, and chicken and mushroom a la king. So the first dump bag I'm going to be making is mushroom stroganoff. We have got quite a lot of meat on the menu this month, and my kids aren't really that into meat too much, so I thought we'll do this one mushroom, which might be a little bit of a gamble because I can't say they're the biggest fans of mushrooms either, but we will see how it goes. So essentially, I've sliced and weighed out my mushrooms. So I'm going to pop them into the freezer bags. Next, I'm going to add in some frozen pre-chopped onion. Now, I've done that this time just to save a little bit of time on the food prep part of today. And I have found some really good offers on frozen onions when I was out and about shopping. So I've swapped out for that. These are really handy to have in the freezer, as like with all frozen veg, they're a great way to cut down on food waste, like, I don't know, buying a packet of onions and having that one left in the cupboard that you haven't found a use for. I'm also using the frozen garlic cubes that I mentioned earlier to save time as well. I'm adding in stock pot. In the sneeze. Oh dear. So next up, I'm adding in the paprika, followed by some mustard. And you'll notice I haven't included the dairy ingredient for this recipe in the dump bags because I will add that later when I'm actually reheating it and cooking it. Finally, I'm going to pop in some tomato puree. And that's that. Those are now done, ready to be frozen, and I will defrost thoroughly before I reheat in the slow cooker and finish off with some creme fraiche and a squeeze of lemon juice and serve with rice. I had a bit of a month off beef last month as we were trying to eat a little less red meat, but this time you'll notice I'm using beef for a few meals. Firstly, maximising the bolognese base that's cooking in the slow cooker, and now in this beef bourguignon dump bag. I'm interested to see how the kids will get on with this, as they're a bit fussy with the texture of meat, but I'm sure it will be absolutely delicious once it's been slow cooked. The next dump bag is a chicken casserole, and the last time I made this, the kids absolutely loved it because I think it's quite simple flavours. And I remember my mum making chicken casserole when I was younger. Now, I don't know if it's just me and my family that did this, but whenever we had chicken casserole, when she was finishing it off in the oven, she would break up a packet of crisps over the top to give it crunch. I feel like it's like the 90s version of breadcrumbs. And I posted a short about this recently, and some people said that they remember having it on tuna pasta bake. So I don't know if this is just my family and my household, but if you remember it, let me know. So I've added in the onion. Next up, I'm going to add some carrots. I've cut them quite chunky just so that they retain some texture in the slow cooker. I've also got some mushrooms, which again I have kept quite chunky. Then I'm going to add a chicken stock cube. And when the casserole is ready to be reheated in the slow cooker, I will add some extra liquid to break up that stock. Then I'm adding in some thyme. Some flour. And then finally the chicken. And now that's done, I will freeze it flat and defrost when I'm ready to cook, and it will slow cook. And then at the end, I might stir in a little bit of creme fraiche to make the sauce a little creamier. This will be served with mashed potato. We are also having another dump bag that's wine-based, as there is no way I could do a retro-inspired batch cook without making a coq au vin. This will be super tasty with mash, and as with all the sauces made in the slow cooker, if the sauce needs to be a little bit thicker, I'll take the lid off for the last bit of the cooking, take out 2 or 3 tablespoons of the sauce, mix with a heaped tablespoon of corn flour until it forms a paste, and then I'll add this back into the sauce. Doing it this way will prevent you getting lots of lumps and will thicken the sauce a little. The next recipe I'm making is coq au vin, which when I'd mentioned to my dad yesterday that I was going to be doing retro-inspired meals. I think he was pretty excited that this one was on the menu. He was disappointed that this month I'm not making any kind of vol au vent, but I feel like I'm going to have to make him those because I've never seen him so excited talking about food. And it's interesting when you ask different people what are the foods they remember from certain times. And I'm sure there's lots of meals that I've missed out on here. And yeah, depending on where you're from, you probably have different memories of favourite family dinners that you enjoyed when you were a child. So I don't remember having this so much. We were more chicken casseroles. But yes, I feel like my dad's going to have to come round on the night that we eat this meal. So I've added in the carrots. Then I'm going to add in some onions. I feel like I'm using a lot of mushrooms this month in the meals, which is more than we normally would have. I feel like I've replaced the beans and lentils of the last batch cook with an absolute ton of mushrooms. And it was really lucky, actually, that mushrooms just happened to be on special offer in the veg bit of the supermarket when I did my shop. So it was perfect timing for this batch cook. Next up is the wine. The last time I made a dump bag that had red wine in it was before I owned these bag clips, and it was really hard to make sure none of the liquid escaped. So this feels a lot calmer than it did the last time I used red wine in a dump bag. Next, I'm going to add a chicken stock pot. I quite like these because they are very flavoursome, but I am aware that they are ultra processed. So I am trying to have a go at making my own chicken stock. I just need to perfect the recipe a little bit more so it packs the same amount of flavour as these do. Finally, I'm going to add the chicken, and I'm using chicken thighs for this. And actually previously I always used to cook with chicken breast, but chicken thighs do work really well for slow cooker meals, and I find that the kids prefer the texture of chicken thighs. So I'm a bit of a convert now, but before I hardly ever used them. When I unpacked the shopping for this month's batch cook, the kids were delighted to see tinned pineapple in the bags, and I'm putting them in this recipe as the base to sweet and sour chicken sauce, which I think is going to be a real hit with them. This will be served with rice and cooked in the slow cooker. This could be quite fun with some air fried spring rolls on the side, and I might look out for those in the shop, as that might encourage the kids to try this out a little bit more with the mix of textures. Finally, I'm trying a recipe that I've not had before, but it came up when I was planning this video in the research that I did. This one is chicken a la king. This recipe actually dates back quite a long way, but seemingly was popular in the 80s. When I mentioned to my dad that I was making this, he got really excited about it, so we'll have to have him over on the night where we enjoy this meal. As we've got a mash with quite a lot of the meals that we're eating this month, this will actually be served with some pasta stirred through it, like a kind of creamy chicken pasta bake. The most amazing thing happened when we tasted this recipe, that I realised that I had accidentally recreated my favourite dish from my favourite restaurant. And by some miracle, the kids were even asking for more mushrooms. So this is 100% going on the menu next month. So my 6 dump bags are now finished. I've labelled them up and they will be frozen flat. Now, be very careful with how you freeze some of these bags, as you might have noticed there, some of the wine did escape from one of my bags, but they are now fully sealed and neatly packed away in the freezer. And these are so handy to have in, as it's such a great feeling knowing the slow cooker is on at home when we're racing between clubs and activities. I'm going to move on to the next section of the meals now, some of which will be made in my Thermomix, as I'm trying to just be as time efficient as possible, and some which will be made on the hob. But first, the potatoes are done, so I'm going to mash them up with some milk, butter and whole grain mustard. I'm now going to make my mum's fish pie. Now, when I was talking about this retro plan, my friend said that she has this really cool memory from when she was younger of fish pies having hard-boiled eggs in them and being topped with puff pastry. So I'm going to try that version this month. Now, on a previous video, someone commented that they'd never seen a fish pie being made before, so I am quite intrigued to know how you enjoy yours. Are you familiar with it with eggs, or have you just never heard of a fish pie before? I like to make mine by poaching fish in milk to start off with, and then I use this milk to form the base of the white sauce. I am using frozen whitefish fillets this month. Normally I would use a mix of whitefish and salmon, but these were on such a good offer and I'm trying to keep costs down that I decided to use purely whitefish this month. Next up, the fish is poached and has been removed, so I'm going to make a roux and then slowly add in the milk and keep stirring until I've got a nice smooth sauce. And I will admit, I am still getting used to using these stainless steel pans. I feel like I either don't get them hot enough or I get them too hot and I'm burning butter, getting oil everywhere, you name it. So I feel like this is quite bold for me to try and do this cheese sauce in the stainless steel pan, and hopefully I will get it right this time. I like to add a little bit of mustard powder to my roux base to make the sauce extra tangy, and then I finish off with some cheese. Now, it's always worth tasting it at this point just to see if the sauce is to your taste or if you need to add a little bit more cheese, a bit more pepper, whatever it might be. Definitely worth trying it now. Then I have added in my fish and some frozen peas, and I lay halved boiled eggs on the top and cover with my puff pastry. Now, I am not the most aesthetic cook. I'm very much a home cook under significant time pressure. So this is not the most beautiful pastry you will see, but I have a little trick up my sleeve to try and make these pies look a little bit more exciting. So as you might remember at the beginning of this batch cook, I roasted a chicken, and I've now taken that chicken and I've shredded it up into quite a good amount of meat here. Now the key is to try and buy a large chicken if you're going to want to get a few meals of meat out of it. On the hob, I have prepared a really tasty chicken pie base. This is similar to my bolognese, so I start off by taking my pre-chopped vegetable mix to save some time, and I'll get that softening up in the pan with some chopped leeks, some garlic, and wait until that becomes nice and soft. Then I'm going to add in some flour, a generous spoon of Dijon mustard, some chicken stock and cream cheese to combine. Now last month I actually put a tin of lentils in a similar pie, which in fact at the time was an accident, but it was really, really delicious. This time I'm going to keep it simple. Now this goes into the dish and is also topped with puff pastry. Again, this isn't the neatest pastry you will see on a pie, so I thought with the leftover offcuts of pastry I would jazz it up a little bit, get one of my kids' veg cutters and make some little heart shapes to put on the top. And when this is ready to be baked in the oven, I will give it an egg wash, just so that when the pastry cooks, it takes on a nice golden colour. Now that's done, I'm going to get my sliced potatoes parboiling and make up the cheese sauce for my lasagna. So I am being a little bit lazy here and I'm outsourcing this to the Thermomix, but usually I would make a roux on the hob, just like I did for the fish pie before. Now, normally when I make a cheese sauce, like when I make mac and cheese, I do like to add butter beans and butternut squash that I've blended together. But I think that might be deviating too far from the recipe for this next bake. In my community post researching for this video, someone very kindly suggested that I try making a cheese and onion pie. Now, my kids love anything beige, cheesy and potato based. This was a definite yes on the try list. While it might not be the healthiest and most colourful of meals, I think this will go down pretty well with our family. I also think that the portion size that we eat probably will be slightly less than what I'm making here in this dish, so hopefully I'll get some leftovers for my lunch. So as you can see, I have layered up the sliced potatoes with my onions, which I browned off in the pan and cooked until they were really nice and soft and seasoned with a little bit of salt and pepper. I'm layering that up with some grated cheese. And then once I've hit the final layer, I've poured some milk over the top and put a little bit more cheese on. Now this actually gets baked in the oven before it goes in the freezer, just so it retains a nice texture once you're ready to eat it. I'm now going to use the Thermomix again to make a moussaka. Now, we've not actually tried our kids on moussaka before, so we've gone for a lentil version just to see how they handle the texture of that, as we have quite a lot of meat across the other recipes in the batch cook this month. So what I've done is I've taken my aubergine and I have layered it up with a lentil ragu, which I mixed up in the Thermomix, and then topped with some bechamel sauce and a little bit of parmesan on the top. So going back to the chicken that I used for the pie, one of my mum's all-time best recipes is her coronation chicken, and every time we have a buffet you can guarantee there will be coronation chicken sandwiches. I thought this was a great retro meal to bring into our month of dinners, and I'm putting a different twist on it. So I've made up a batch of coronation chicken using some mayonnaise, curry powder, mango chutney, shredded chicken and some sultanas. And then what I'm going to do with that is pop it onto some naan breads and cook it in the oven as like a spicy pizza topping. We've used naans as pizza bases before and it works really well. And I feel like you're either going to think this is a genius idea or I've gone too far with this one. I didn't put cheese on these pizzas, but you could, and I simply dressed mine with a little bit of chopped coriander. Next up, I'm going to use the last bit of the chicken to make a very basic mild curry sauce in an attempt to make a Vesta curry inspired dinner. Now the kids love mild curries and anything crispy, so I kind of feel like this throwback meal could be right up their street. And I will definitely be having at least one of our parents over to witness this, as like the coronation chicken pizza, they're either going to think this is a nostalgic triumph or a complete sacrilege to the original dish. Now, for those who haven't heard about Vesta curries, essentially they were an easy to make packet curry made fancy with some crispy noodles on the top. Now, I'm not a huge fan of deep frying things, and this is where you might not agree with the recipe, that I have substituted the crispy noodles on the top for these crispy lentil chips to add that crunch and that spice and that flavour without having to deep fry some noodles, as I feel like that was a step too far for me. So finally the slow cooker is done and I can make the last set of the meals. So first I'm going to make my cottage pies. I am going to mix that with some mixed frozen vegetables and then top it with some of the mashed potato that I made earlier. Now, when I was doing my research, apparently people used to call this a shepherd's pie, but if you ask me, a cottage pie has beef and a shepherd's pie has lamb. Not sure if everybody agrees with that, but that's the line I draw. Next up, I have taken another portion of the beef off and I've opened up some kidney beans, some black beans and some smoked paprika. And I'm going to mix that all together to use as a mild chili con carne base to have with rice or baked potatoes or nachos. Then I'm going to make my lasagna. So I have got my bechamel sauce, which I made earlier, and I put that in the fridge to firm up. I actually feel like this cheese sauce is something like many things I learnt by complete accident. So in one of my earlier batch cooks, I made the cheese sauce a bit too early in the process. So I put it in the fridge to chill. Then when I came to this stage, as I am now, where I'm layering up the lasagna, I actually found that the sauce held its shape way better and didn't blend in with the bolognese as much if it was slightly cooler. So I finished the top layer with the last bit of the sauce and mixed it with a little bit of the ragu to give it a nice colour on top. And this will be frozen and then topped with cheese and baked in the oven when we're ready to enjoy it. For my final recipe, I thought I would have a go at reimagining a classic, which might not have been everybody's favourite dish, but certainly looked like quite an iconic dish to have a go at recreating. So some of you might be familiar with Finder's pancakes, which were, if I've understood it right, a pancake filled with like a beef filling with a crunchy breadcrumb outside. Now, when I mentioned to my mum and dad that I was going to have a go at making this, neither of them seemed keen to try it, but I think they'll like my version. It slightly reimagines it, using wraps instead of a pancake batter and making the most of the bolognese, which I made earlier. So essentially, I have microwaved up some butter, added a little bit of parsley, you could add some garlic granules here as well, and brushed the base of a dish with the mixture. Next up, I have taken some tortilla wraps, cut them in half, and then filled the middle section of each half with a little bit of beef mince, some cheese, folded them up like a little parcel and layered them into my dish. I then spread a little bit more of the garlic on the top and topped with some cheese. Now, to make it like a Finder's pancake, I'm adding an extra topping, which is some breadcrumbs, which I've simply made by toasting up some bread, whizzing them up in the food processor and sprinkling them on the top. So now I've got the beef pancake and a really crunchy topping. And when I tried this out on my mum, she said it was a pretty good throwback to what the original was like, but much more tastier and with a much nicer texture. So who knows? Just like with the Coronation Chicken Pizza and the Vesta Curry, you might think I have completely ruined the original dish, or you might think this is a triumph. I'll leave that one up to you. So there you have it. In just under 5 hours, I've made a month of retro-inspired meals for us to enjoy, and they're pretty hearty meals, so I think they'll go down well with the kids. For me, thinking ahead to next month, I probably would like to have a little bit more diversity of vegetables, beans, and pulses. But overall, this was a really fun experiment and created some really great family dinners, bringing back the classics. I think this is a great example of how food can be a really nostalgic experience and food can carry so many wonderful memories. I know people before in the comments have talked about dishes they remember their families or their parents making. So if you do have any family favourite dinners that I've missed here or I totally need to try, please be sure to let me know. Hopefully this video has given you some great inspiration on how you can lighten the load of meal prepping and enjoy delicious meals as a family without having to cook from scratch every night. If you did like this video, please let me know in the comments below and be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so.